Thank you everyone for joining us today. Our webinar today is called The Evolution of Talent Strategy, How Your Hiring Should Change as You Grow. We're very excited that today's speakers are Jim Conti, the Director of Talent at Sprout Social, and William Tincup, Principal Analyst at Key Interval Research. And I'm actually going to hand this off to Jim to let him introduce himself, because he can do it a bit better than I can.
Thanks so much, Dana. Hello, everyone. So good to be with you today. Again, my name is Jim Conti. I'm the Director of Talent at Sprout Social. Sprout Social is a social media management software company based in Chicago. We're about 5 years old, have about 15,000 brands worldwide that use our products today, and about 180 employees. My background, I actually was a teacher in my first life and then moved into education nonprofit for a number of years before joining the team here at Sprout. And it's been an incredible adventure thus far, and looking forward to sharing a little bit of that adventure with everyone today.
And I'll introduce
All right, William.
Yeah, no worries. William Tincup, Key Interval Research, which is a new research company as of October of last year. Prior to that, I was a consultant on user adoption of HR and recruiting software, and prior to that, I owned an ad agency. I have an MBA in Marketing and Entrepreneurship, an MA in American Indian Studies, and an MA in Art History, which tells you that I was in school for 8 years, and I have a lot of student loan debt, and I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be here because I'm a geek, absolutely a geek about HR, recruiting, and technology. So this is kind of the intersection points of what makes me really, really geeky. I've been married for 21 years, have 2 boys, 9 and 5, and I collect coins.
Awesome. Thank you, William, and thank you, Jim. All right, moving forward. Just a little bit about today. We're all going to discuss the evolving talent needs of a growing company, how talent teams can prove their strategic business value in a growing organization, and we will have a live Q&A during the last 15 or so minutes of the webinar. But I do encourage you to submit your questions throughout the webinar. There's a rate this and ask a question button above the webinar panel in BrightTalk, and if you ask a question throughout the webinar, we'll try to address it during the webinar if it works with the flow that we're in. We're also going to be live tweeting with hashtag talent strategy if that is something that you're into. So moving forward, how talent planning and recruitment changes you grow.
Excellent. Thanks, Dana. So I want to step in and kind of offer a few kind of opening thoughts here as we're getting started. I think the concept of change here is really important. The reality of the situation is that at any given moment, you have to be developing both a proactive and a reactive strategy around talent. That in any given moment, you have to be thinking about 6 months in advance, but also dealing in real time with things that are happening kind of on the ground. You don't want to be totally reactive and all of that. You don't want to just be looking at, okay, something has happened, now I need to fix it. You need to plan for that change, 6 months in advance, and always be thinking about where people are headed in the organization. I think that when I look at my experience here at Sprout, the kind of phrase that I come back to time and again is we aren't just implementers. We aren't just people that are putting into action other people's plans. My team, I'm fortunate to work with 3 really stellar members of the talent team here at Sprout. The 4 of us really work together to create a cohesive strategy that is supportive of all the different departments. And talent and HR is an interesting corner because we're at this intersection of all different parts of the organization, all different corners of what's happening in the business. And so in many cases, we're the ones that are able to kind of paint the larger picture for the company of who's doing what, where, and how, and making sure that from a talent perspective, you're supporting all those initiatives. So I really think of that kind of as a kind of core of what we do is not just implementing other people's plans, but driving the creation of that strategy from the start.
Yeah, and the things that I'll add is really the old way of thinking about talent planning and recruitment is that the business was more important than the talent. And I think we've seen a shift over the last couple of years, and some of this could be macroeconomic. We're in better economic times, et cetera. But the talent is the business. And so, you kind of start with this idea that there's a business that somehow operates separately than the talent. Is not so much. I think a lot of us that have grown up with this mantra, this axiom, is like, okay, I get it. As it relates to evolution specifically, I think you have to kind of, first of all, be humble, understand that the CEO's dilemma, which is you don't know what you don't know, is also our dilemma and everyone else's dilemma. So as you grow, you get smarter about what works and what doesn't. So, if you take a look at Jim's career, if he's at Sprout Social 3 years from now, he's going to be 10 years better because he'll have built better relationships with the hiring managers and C-suite. He'll understand his candidate flow and all that stuff. So he'll have a deeper understanding of the relationships, the tributaries of relationships that work and don't work, because there's failure there too. And he'll have a better understanding of where candidate flows come from. When folks ask me about marketing, because I do get a lot of questions about marketing, I tend to tell them, like, here's the best way to work with your marketing staff. Go to a medical supply company, buy lab coats, put your brand, your logo, and your name on those lab coats, and let them go experiment. Because that's what real great marketing does. It just says, go tinker, throw some things against the wall. If it works, great. If it doesn't, great. I think there's a lot of things that also, from that kind of anecdote, that apply to recruiting. And it kind of comes down to, don't be afraid to experiment. And as you grow and as you evolve, try things. Like, don't be afraid. Just try things. And if it blows up in your hands, okay. But where I tend to see where kind of that cliff of evolution that stops is when people get timid. They get conservative. And they either stop innovating because they get tired of it, or they don't want to risk political capital or their jobs or whatever. But I think it's a game of always be innovating, new sourcing strategies, new social strategies, assessing technologies, and you just keep trying to evolve what you know about the business and what you know about the talent that works in the business, and you just keep evolving because you keep experimenting and innovating.
Yeah. I think one other piece, William, there that you mentioned that definitely kind of triggered something with me is the concept of kind of how you then have to mold yourself into being a partner within the process, and that's something that takes time. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. I can imagine that a common question people might be thinking right now is like, all right, throwing around this word proactive, like, how do I actually be proactive? What does that actually mean? The honest answer is that I wasn't proactive when I first started at Sprout. I've been here for a little over 2 years, and at that time I was very much in a learning phase. I had to understand the business. I had to understand the teams that I was supporting, who we were hiring, things like that. But a really kind of specific real-life example is that a little over a year and a half ago, connected with a candidate on AngelList that I thought looked interesting, and for no other reason than his profile looked interesting. So we shot some emails back and forth. Kind of was clear. I was like, we're not hiring anything right now. I really like your background. Let's stay in touch. Cut to a couple months ago, we were doing some sourcing for a new role on our support team, and this like little memory kicked in the back of my head, and I went back and looked at this guy's profile again. It was kind of the perfect fit. I was like, wow, we've had this guy in our pipeline for a year and a half, and I am so glad I remembered. But I think when you're thinking about proactive strategies, a lot of it's about paying attention and learning. And so by the time I came to the table with this candidate for our hiring team to take a look at, they already had the trust in myself and the recruiter that was working on the role to know that we had a head on our shoulders about what we were going to be looking for this, but also knowing that we'd had a track record of bringing in really stellar talent. And so when we brought someone to the table, they already had that inherent buy-in. And I think that inherent buy-in is really important in terms of the ability to be both proactive and reactive within your hiring plans, within the talent planning as the organization grows.
I'm really excited that people are actually asking questions. Sometimes we don't get them throughout the webinar, but thank you so much, guys, and please keep asking. I think this one kind of fits with what you guys are talking about, and apologies if it derails you, but they're saying, help, I've always been the sole recruiter, but now I think we need to grow out our team. How do I prove the value ROI in either another recruiter or someone who's in charge of talent management and happiness?
That's fantastic. I'll take a first stab here, William, and then please chime in. So you're talking about my own background. That's exactly what happened with me here at Sprout. I started as the sole talent team member recruiter on staff. And I think that the thing I had to be really transparent with myself and with my team about is when I found myself starting to become the bottleneck. When I was the reason that we weren't able to fill positions fast enough or hire the team members that we needed to, just because I didn't have enough hours in the day or enough hands to reply to emails or whatever it was. And I was really able to build a business case around looking at things like time to hire, things like volume of candidates that were coming in, how long it was taking us to be able to review candidates and get people kind of in the office for interviews and things like that. And then able to take that kind of knowledge that I was gaining and add and say, hey, if we had an extra set of hands on staff, we'd be able to make this process so much more seamless. And so that's where I was able to make the case for that second person on the team, and then third and fourth now that we're 4 people now. So I think that it's about being really self-aware with yourself about how you are going to be the bottleneck for the organization. And to be honest, like talent and recruitment never should be. We are business enablers. We're helping them, but we are not. We should not be the limiting factor in the situation. So whenever you find yourself there, you really have to be honest with your team about, hey, here's where I'm struggling. Here's where I'm not helping you the way I need to. Let's make this a little bit stronger for you.
Yeah, I think bottleneck's a great word because it's an operational word. There's inputs, outputs, throughputs, bottlenecks, etc. And what's great about it is you want to hire. Most hires are right before the break point. So you typically have a sense of where the break point is, and right before that, you want to hire somebody. That happens everywhere. That happens in sales and marketing and ops, finance, whatever. So it's right before the break point. And when you're the bottleneck and you can't get it all done at the quality level that you want to get it done, you're already at the break point. So it's recognizing what's coming and then making the business case, as Jim's already alluded to, of here's what we would do with another recruiter. And here's how we would enable success, because you want to, through the whole company, you want to hire before the break point, especially when it comes to HR and recruiting.
And I think the last piece I'll add here is that when we're reviewing kind of a challenge that we're coming up against here at Sprout, we kind of look at the potential solution in 3 areas. There's either talent, so adding people to the situation. There's process, refining how we're doing something, or software. Is there something out there that can make our lives better? And so I want to also kind of add the caveat there that it's not like I'm just going and saying, hey, we need to add another head. We need to add another head. It's a really kind of strict reflection process for us to kind of think about where is the actual challenge that we're facing and how do we best tackle this, and then implementing kind of accordingly in that way.
I bet we should move on, but actually we have one more interesting question that kind of relates to what William had been talking about earlier. How do you handle when marketing controls how the brand is presented to the marketplace and aren't willing to take the risk and be creative with recruitment?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because a lot of people want to cut up brand and make brand about a lot of different things, and it is fiefdoms, it is budget, it's all of the darkness that we can all imagine. And so why is marketing there? Well, they feel like they own all of the brand, and the truth is they don't. There are 2 primary areas that marketing cares about. That's with customers and prospects. And with HR in general, there are employees and candidates. So you own at least half the brand. I would tell you, first of all, you just own it. They don't. You do. And you got to do good work. And I think a lot of it is how you collaborate. So if they dictate, that's not collaboration. If you dictate, well, that's not collaboration. Collaboration is getting in a room and talking about it. It's like, okay, what's important to customers and prospects? Okay, here's what we're seeing with employees and candidates. Now, how do we coalesce? How do we bring these together and tell the same-ish story across these different audience groups? So, it's not easy. I will not pretend that it's easy, but I would tell you that I know that you own 2 different parts of that brand. One is that employer brand that represents employees both outwardly facing for themselves, but also outwardly facing for your candidates, and you own everything on the candidate side. Sometimes when people want that fiefdom, they either don't have the quality or they come to it just wanting it because they want more power and budget. and that's usually a fail because marketers are, that they're good at this. Turns out, generally speaking, they're good at this, and so the thing is, it can't be just we want it just because we want it. You've got to be able to tell a compelling story of what you're seeing of people that you're competing with, that they don't have the expertise on refining a message to that audience, and you want to help. You want to collaborate with them. And I think as you do that and then you back that up with great work, they're more than happy to let you do the things that you have more of an influence over your audience.
And as a marketer myself, I think it's part of the fun with the community at work. Like I want to help market my recruiting because I love working here and I want to show that. And so just from a marketer's point of view, it's kind of nice when you get to really collaborate on that.
Yeah. One other thing, and we don't do this here at Sprout, but something I've seen popping up across a couple of different industries now is that recruitment actually falls into marketing as opposed to like a HR or people operations team. Not the way we're structured here, but I think an interesting kind of note within this question is that there are people that are kind of thinking differently about how recruitment and marketing actually connect and talk about brands. For us here at Sprout, we are very specific to make sure that our talent team is at the forefront of the employer brand and of the culture, and so that means we have a very close tie to our marketing team. Not a day goes by that I'm not interacting with them to see what's going on and working on projects with them collaboratively and really placing a significant amount of trust in them to help carry us on several different fronts. So, one of the big kind of pieces where marketing plays in now potentially is with social. And so we have a very specific choice here at Sprout that we don't have like a Sprout Jobs Twitter handle. We roll everything into our main at Sprout social handle. And so I work really closely with our social team as they are getting questions not just about our product or about things that we're doing within the social media space, but also people inquiring about jobs and wanting to know about position openings and things like that. And so it's actually really fun to be able to work collaboratively on other people's specialties as they intersect with my own. And I think that has been a really fun opportunity.
This is great. Let's move on and keep going through. So our next topic is strategies for maintaining a high-performing collaborative culture.
That's a great question. When I think about this, I see a couple of different angles from it. I think there's the macro for the kind of whole company level and then the micro for the talent recruitment team specifically. So from a kind of a macro level, it's something that we really prioritize within our interview prep and interview process to make sure that all the members of our interview teams are really familiar with what we're looking for in the role and how that role is going to interact with them. When you interview at Sprout, you interview with people that are definitely your manager, probably some peers, and then potentially some people that you're kind of correlated to but not directly connected to. And so that chance to really kind of get a 360 view of the role as a candidate is really important. But from a team perspective, it gives us the chance to have more of that buy-in and that everyone's kind of doing that bar raising at all time within the interview process. On more the micro level, I mentioned about the talent team. We focus very heavily on kind of the four of us being the brand in person kind of idea. In every interaction that we have, that we are working to make sure that people are experiencing the best version of Sprout. And I think that kind of a mentality that you approach every conversation, every email with, is really important for communicating the kind of expectation of what it's like to work here and what the excitement around that is. I'll stop there. William, you have some thoughts on this one?
Yeah, a couple things. I think that the old way of thinking here, and we are talking about the evolution of talent strategy, and this old way of thinking is that you can control culture. That somehow you could just put a box around it and you could manage it, manipulate it, et cetera. And now I think most people have kind of gotten to a place where it's like, nah, really, our job is to render the culture. Like, it is what it is. Now, let's render it. And I think that dovetails with we're living in an era of cultural transparency. And again, whether or not you like Glassdoor or love Glassdoor or hate Glassdoor, not really the point. The point is there is Glassdoor, and your CEO is ranked, and your company is ranked. And guess what? I'm not even into their product strategy, but I'm just going to go ahead and guess it'll come that there'll be hiring managers that are rated, recruiters that are rated, bosses that are rated. All that's coming. I mean, it's just a question of time. When will it come? So that cultural transparency of, well, you know what, we should do the right thing. Yeah, we should all live that way. Totally. I think that this is going to push us there faster. So when I look at the strategies for maintaining a high-performing collaborative culture, I immediately scratch maintaining high-performing and collaborative from the sentence, and it's just a game of culture. Culture is an experiment of one. And the fail in HR and recruiting that we've seen over the last couple of years is that everyone wants to be Zappos. And it turns out what works for Zappos works only for Zappos. And I would argue that it barely works for them. That going and ripping off someone else's culture and trying to apply any of it, aspects of it to your culture is just, it's a logical fallacy. You're not going to be able to do it. You've got to figure out what you have. So let's say you have a young workforce and you work hard, play hard, and everyone in the office goes out and drinks. Okay, but there's parts of that you like. We're work hard, play hard. When we're here, we're 100% here. When we're not here, we're 100% not here. But you don't really like the drinking part. Let's say that's, so you highlight the parts that you really like, and you hope that those take steam, and you cultivate those, and you foster those, you enable those, and the things that you don't like, hire to that. Don't make it a part of one of your principles. Like, hey, we work hard and play hard, and we all go get hammered at the end of the week. That might or might not be important, and if it is important, don't play it up. But it is something to think about that. Especially as you grow, which is another part of this webinar, is cultures is plural. If you have an office in New York, you have an office in Dallas, you have an office in San Francisco, you actually have 3 different cultures. You might have a metaculture that pulls all those things together, but you have microcultures that happen in ops and sales and finance and different offices. You can cut it a million different ways. So you have cultures plural, to understand that and know that is one, and then to make sure that you coalesce and have at least a fiber that goes across all those cultures is the second thing. I think that as you look at culture, how you enable it, how you foster, how you render that culture. And there are some people that do this just really, really well, and I'll highlight one. Rackspace down in San Antonio, they have a wonderful employer brand. They basically push their employees out in front of everyone and say, hey, tell them the real story. Don't tell them what we want you to tell them. Tell them the real story. And what they do is, hey, we drink Mountain Dew, we code. All of our offices are different. It's different on your personality. You can come and go as you need. It's outcome based. Like, the employees render the culture. And again, that old way of thinking that the board, C-suite, 5 guys with all the puppet master strings that controlled culture, that's dead. That, first of all, was never there, but we bought into it and thought that it was there, and now we're living in an era where it's going to become more and more obvious of who gets that and who doesn't.
Yeah, harking back again to the title of our webinar here, the concept of the evolution of talent strategy is innately connected to the evolution of culture. Over time, who you are when you're 50 employees is different than who you are when you're 200 employees, and that's not a good or a bad. There's no value associated with that transition. It's just honest and transparent about kind of what that growth of an organization looks like, right? It takes a lot to be able to maintain the good, but it is also something that is going to adjust and change over time with each individual person that joins the organization. They're all going to help form and develop that culture with or without your permission, right? So it's something that you really want to focus within the hiring process to think about what are the strong elements of that culture that you want to maintain, and making sure that you're finding people that share those values, that share those belief systems.
Fantastic. Thank you, guys. All right, so our next topic is going to be about developing employees. So here we are.
Cool. William, you want to take a first stab at this one?
Absolutely. So the old way of thinking, the old way of thinking was don't train the employees as they might leave us. And this has permeated the learning professionals, the training and development, the leadership development professionals. It's plagued us for at least 20 years. And it's this idea that you train somebody, then they become transitory, and they'll leave. The moment you sink this training in them, they're going to leave. And it's all fear mongering. And the truth is, the new way of thinking is relentlessly pursue training. Hire people that want to be trained. Hire people that yearn, I want to learn. I don't know it all. I'm not God. I want to know more, and I'd like to work in an environment that helps me and trains me and facilitates my growth. And I think we're living in a wonderful time now where we're shedding that old thing of the past of, fear, and they're going to leave. Now we're just thinking about, okay, how can we do this? And you can't be afraid to train. I think if you deal with some of the tactics here, you got to meet employees where they are. Relentlessly train everyone, not just the top talent. So one of the things I'd say there is, don't just focus on the 20% of the workforce. Focus on everybody and meet them where they are, meaning how do they like to learn? Do they learn best with webinars? Do they learn in seminars? Do they learn one-on-one? Like how do they, the learning style, if you want to get really specific, but also learning differences. If you've got someone that's got dyslexia or mild dyslexia, they might need to learn differently than the way that you want to teach them. So understanding that, and then it just becomes a game of relentlessly making sure of where they are and where they want to go and that you're supporting them. And I believe as you do that, those people don't want to leave. They don't want to go anywhere else because they found a place that actually cares about their growth. And even if they do, okay, what's the worst case? While they were with you, they did wonderful work, and then they left. Oh, okay, well, then they left. Then, you know what? Guess what? They might come back. If you actually parted with them in good ways, those folks, chances are they'll go out, test the waters, find out the grass is not greener on the other side of the fence, and they'll come back. And if they come back, fantastic. But even if they don't, put the money, time, money, and energy into them while they're with you.
Yeah, and I think that we're sitting at a little bit of the kind of precipice of the evolution that you're talking about there, William. The sense that the challenge that we're thinking through today is finding the balance between what our team wants and what the organization needs, and where is that intersection? Where are those two kind of desires, those two pieces to the puzzle? Where are they actually intersecting? And so I spend a lot of my time sitting down with our team here and having individual and direct conversations with people and really pushing them to name it, to really say, here's the thing that I want, here's what I'm excited about, here's what I'm interested in, and really pushing people past a potentially scripted answer of like, oh, I really want to become a manager. Well, why? What's enticing to you about that? Why do you think that that's a great career move for you? Where do you see yourself in 5 and 10 years? That question might seem like a slightly tired question, and it kind of is. That's fine. But at the same time, it's also a valid question. And so I really enjoy when I get to have those direct one-on-one conversations with my team that's helping to form the foundations of what we're doing around career development and management training and pieces like that here at Sprout. And it's something that is an interesting question because there's no right solution, and there's no single solution that's going to fit for 80% of my workforce. No, they all have different needs and different desires and different thoughts. So I think with that, it's again going back to that core of what I started with, saying, what does the business need? Where is our opportunity? And what does an individual employee want? And then finding those intersections and then making those intersections reality.
I love that. Because you're treating each employee as an experimental one. And I love the idea that you push them to go, okay, don't just describe something and leave it vague. Tell me exactly what you want, why you want it, and how you think it'll help you and us. Let's align our interests, if you will. That's Ben Franklin 101, aligning individual interests with community interests. And in this case, the company is the community. I love that. That's genius.
Totally, and I appreciate that. Thanks, William. But I would also look at my background as a teacher, going back to my teaching days. This concept of in teaching, the individualized education plans is exactly what we're trying to do in the workplace today. We're trying to look at our individual employees and find out what is their specific learning style, like you were talking about. Is it webinars? Is it seminars? What is it? And then helping them kind of find their path, but guiding it, kind of putting the bumpers on it to make sure that they're headed in a direction that also helps the company. If anyone in the audience has a teacher friend and you're kind of worried about this like talent development stuff, go talk to someone that has a classroom of 30 kids every day that they have 30 different educational plans for, and at the same time all those kids are moving forward together. People are doing this, and they're doing it every day in the classrooms across our country. So like, go talk to those teacher friends of yours and kind of be like, hey, I heard this guy in this webinar talk about this concept of like individualized education plans. Like, what does it actually look like? How do you implement that? How do you do differentiated instruction in your classroom? Because that's where my foundation for this kind of concept comes from, and I'm just applying it to the workspace now, to the kind of workforce.
That's awesome. We have a really great question here all right, so developing employees. How do you make the training development of a smaller org attractive to candidates coming from larger established companies that have training departments, rotational management training, etc.? I've struggled with this in recruiting top candidates, even though we do have a commitment to development.
So I think for me, hearing that question echoes back to what I was kind of sharing before around really encouraging an employee to name their desires. I think if we're looking here at some of those rotational programs directly out of undergraduate school, that you're working through 3 or 4 different departments, I don't know that I have a great kind of counter argument to that. That's an experiential opportunity for those individuals. That's a chance for them to see what different areas of a business looks like, and they're still trying to figure out what they want to do with their career on a very high level, very, very broad strokes there. But if you're talking about at large organizations where there's potentially scripted training programs and things like that, the training might be great, but again, it might not be hitting the needs of everyone in the organization. And I think that's actually where, as a smaller organization, you're so much more agile to be able to make individualized adjustments more than a 10,000 person company might. So if you're talking about a more experienced hire that's focused a little bit more on kind of their own individual development, as opposed to just the exposure of like a rotational program, their own individual development, what you sell is the chance to say like, hey, we don't have a scripted program, and I think that's actually to your benefit. Tell me what you want, and we're going to make that happen. And I think that kind of taking it down to the individual there and having that very transparent conversation with them is really important. But I guess that caveat of like, it depends on what type of training we're actually talking about, but that's kind of where I come at it from.
Yeah, I think what's attractive to those people is obviously going to be different. When I got out of B school, Procter & Gamble wanted to hire me for an 18-month training program to travel the world and learn market research the Procter & Gamble way, because they have their they have their own model of market research, and 100% travel. I'd actually never be home. I would never have a home or an office or whatever. I'd just be on the road the whole time. And only being married about that time, 7 years, I thought, this is a pathway to divorce. And if I wanted that, I guess I'll take the position. But I did not. I declined that position. I think you got to make it. Jim's already kind of hit the best part of this. Is if they're looking at you, there's something unresolved. If you're talking to them, it's like, hey, why would you come work with, a big company? Maybe you're just tired of everything being slow. The problem with big companies is they're not nimble. Or maybe your voice is, one of many and you don't really get to shine. Well, you know what? Smaller company, guess what you get? We're going to work fast. We're going to move fast, and your input is critical. And we'll develop what you need. But I think it's all a game at that particular point of not being like a big company. So everything that makes a big company, fail, if you will, picking those things apart and using that as your sales strategy. Hey, listen, I'm sure you get tired of going to meetings after meetings after meetings. In fact, my father quit Weyerhaeuser because he knew it was time to leave when they scheduled a meeting to determine when the next meeting was. And he came. I remember him coming. I remember him coming home and going,
"That's so painful."
yeah, right. I remember him coming home going, "Yeah, I gotta do something different. I can't do this anymore. 35 years, enough. Kids are out. I gotta do something different." And he went on to teach after that. But that's the thing. Big companies. That's all big companies. If you've got 10,000 employees, that is your day in and day out. And some people thrive in that and will never want anything other than that. And there's a group of people, a cluster of talent that actually is just that wears on their soul. And so you play to the things that make, a small, mid-sized business wonderful. And so you play off, fear. They say in marketing that there are only two platitudes, fear and greed. So use those to your betterment.
Exactly. I'm like, I hope that doesn't exist in talent world, but maybe. I don't know. No, but what you were saying, William, definitely rung true, kind of in regards to the, kind of sell the, we're a small company, we're fast, we're nimble. I think that I also look at our conversation on culture in regards to that. If that's part of your culture, it's really important within this recruitment process. And I know we're talking about development of employees, so we're a little bit past the recruitment piece, but because it starts in recruitment, that you have to be transparent with your candidates about what the experience of working at your company is like. And if you are a fast and nimble environment, then you need to make sure people know that so they don't show up on day one and their head is spinning, right? And let them say yeah, they might be the best person in the world on paper, and you might be so excited about them, they're the perfect fit for this role, then that's great. But if they're not going to be a fit for your culture and they're not going to fit into how you operate and how you function as a business, then it's going to be a miss on both sides. So I know we're talking about developing employees, but that harks back to that culture and recruitment piece we were talking about a little bit earlier, that you have to be transparent with those pieces as you're talking to candidates.
This is great. I just wanted to move you guys along because you just know so much. I have to keep moving you to new topics. All right, so proving your strategic business value in a growing organization. Go.
Yeah, I'll take the first whack at this. I think the old way of thinking here is that the recruiter didn't necessarily need to know the business. And I think we put the nails in that coffin in the new way. It's you got to understand the business first. In fact, I give the advice to most recruiters and HR folks: don't make a decision in the first 100 days. Refuse to make a decision. If they come to you and they want a decision, don't make a decision. Learn the business, learn the personalities, learn the culture, learn the chemistry, build all of those things, and really get a bead on what's going on, what drives the business, etc., and then start making some decisions. So I think for me, it's you didn't necessarily need to know the business years ago. Now it's critical. You have to know the business. Secondly, I'd say recruiting metrics. What's important? What's been historically important? That's a part of your learning. I think you could do that in the recruiting phase before you take the job. Like, what do y'all track? What do you care about? What's going on? Where's it going? So that you understand what things need to be tinkered with and experimented with. I think communicating is critical because typically recruiting happens behind the veil, and it's like a black box. People don't know kind of how it works. I think the more you communicate what is and isn't working, the better it is for everybody. So last thing I'd say is innovate or die. If you really, really want to be important to the business, you keep innovating. You keep finding ways. And I tell people this all the time. The best recruiting stories are never told publicly because they become a game of competitive differentiation. And that's how they win. So you'll never hear the recruiter at Apple tell, oh, yeah, this is how we recruit all of our software engineers. Here's our secret sauce. That person would never say that, because Oracle and Facebook and Salesforce.com and everybody would rip it off. So the best recruiting stories become competitive intelligence. And so go and innovate and get to a point where you do that. And I think part of that is learning from the other industry innovators, the Lars Schmitz of the world that are out there doing great work. Learn from them. Learn what they're doing. Figure out what kind of applies, what you think you want to experiment with your firm, and innovate.
Yeah, totally echo that. So in preparing for this webinar, William and I obviously had some conversations, and I'm fairly certain that the concept of learn the business you stole from me. But that's okay. I'll let you take credit for it this time, William. I'll let it slide. No, I'm kidding. So yes, ditto to all of that. I think the other kind of elements that I would throw in here, one, from the learn the business perspective, I think that it is imperative that a talent team understands the holistic nature of how an organization functions. Everything from how do you build software or your product or whatever it is, to how do you make money? How do you acquire customers? What does that process look like? What are the stages in that process like? Your talent team needs to be experts on all of it. And when I look, as a very specific example, when I look here at our talent team, we're kind of divided up into a couple of areas. So we have one person that manages most of our sales and success hiring, another that handles most of our technical product hiring, and then another that handles ops, marketing, design, kind of all the others in that bucket. Recently, I think one of my really exciting stories about kind of the work of my team is that our technical side was just inundated with recs. We were just super busy and trying to hire as many people as we possibly could, it felt like. So it was really exciting. But during that time, we were able to kind of pinch hit with our sales recruiter to step in, and he actually sourced and hired an Android engineer. And for anyone that has to source and hire Android engineers, you know that that is a challenging group of people to be able to track down. And the fact that we had a person that predominantly works with sales teams that's talking about time on the phones and commission structures and revenue per trial and all sorts of stuff like that, for him to be able to pinch hit and be able to do something very different than what he does on a day-to-day, but because of the way that we prioritize the learning for our team, is incredible. And I think that every talent team needs to be agile like that. It's really important. I think the other piece that I kind of look at when thinking about the evolution of our strategy over time, and then looking at this as the strategic business value to the organization, is how we're measuring our success. And not to jump too far ahead, but the concept of time to performance is something that we focus on quite a bit here at Sprout, trying to figure out how quickly a new employee is able to get their legs under them and to not just give value to the organization, but for them to feel effective, for them to feel like they're contributing something, and to be able to see the impact of their work at the organization. I think that kind of going back to where you started, William, there's a bunch of different metrics that are out there that I just don't get excited about. Time to hire, cost per hire, stuff like that. Yeah, you need to have a pulse on that stuff, for sure. I'm not going to say no. But I think that there's a lot more out there that's really interesting in terms of how you can measure and what you can measure that really gets you thinking, that is going to be so much better for the business in the long term.
This is great. I'm going to keep us going because we're at 42 minutes after the hour. Our next kind of topic here is just about changing the metrics of success, changing from the traditional recruiting metrics that perpetuate volume and lack any connection to actual business performance to an output-focused success metric.
Yeah, so I was obviously knew this slide was coming next when I was talking in my last comments here, so I'll kind of keep going. I think this is a really exciting area that talent teams can start thinking differently and creatively. There are some organizations out there that are talking a lot about what they're doing with it, and I would encourage you to kind of search out some of the new metrics that people are talking about. But I think for me, the one that I really love is the time to performance, how long it's taking someone to get up and running. One thing that we're doing here at Sprout to help to measure that and to start put some structure around how do we actually figure that out, is that we're leveraging the relationships that the talent team, so other organizations, our recruiters, developing the relationships they're developing with candidates over time and leveraging that into an employee's first year here at Sprout. And so rather than day one when someone shows up at our office to start working, that the recruiter shakes their hand and says welcome, and then they don't see them for 6 months, we were like, wow, we're really missing an opportunity here to leverage the relationship that recruiter and that candidate built over the time that they were applying and interviewing and talking to us and all of those different pieces. And so what we do now is we have a pretty robust kind of check-in process over the course of the first 60 days for employees, and then throughout the first year quarterly with the talent team member that they actually worked with during their hiring process. Giving them a chance to give us feedback on our recruitment process, but also get feedback from them. Are you able to get your job done? Do you have the tools that you need? Is there anything that we can help you advocate for? New employees can sometimes be really nervous, and so this concept of performance can sometimes be a little curious because someone's just not comfortable speaking up yet, when in reality, if someone just gave them the access to this specific tool, or they got to know this person on another team that they have to work with, that facilitation can actually make them perform more quickly and then make them feel more comfortable, acclimate to culture, things like that. And so I think for me, I really am sitting in that performance area right now and trying to figure out a little bit more how do we continue to improve upon time to performance for our new hires, and really having that be a driving metric behind what we're doing on the talent side.
I would say ditto to everything Jim just said, and my love of time to performance. Here's the thing: we're early in that whole part. Like cost of hire is a metric that has been batted around for 40 years. We're at the early stages of that, and we're going to learn so much over the next decade of studying it, failing at it, and figuring out what are the edges of time performance. I'm excited to see what we learn, but I want to kind of focus on volume. Volume's a cancer. When recruiters or hiring managers tell me, hey, I had 10,000 people apply for this job, I didn't tell them why. There's no way that 10,000 people fit that job. Why are you proud? And this goes everywhere, y'all. This is C-suite, hiring managers, recruiters, HR, candidates. Everyone believes that more is better, and more isn't better. I'm here to tell you that quality hiring is about quality candidate flow. And you can't get there just because you have 10,000 people that apply to your job. You really want 100 people to apply to your job, the 100 right people. So getting to that point where you assess and screen out all the trash that won't make it in this job, you put all that stuff far out in the pipeline to where 100 only make it through. Then you interview, then you go deep, then you find 3 candidates, then you make an offer, and then you make a quality hire. So I look at volume. Anytime you say volume in recruiting, it's a cancer, and it's going to spread. And there's all of our hands are bloody here. So there are no innocent victims, because even candidates think that they can get into, a job board and go and apply for 300 jobs in one day. That's a form of volume, and it's on the other side, and it's just as wrong. And so, when I talk to probably more or less younger people that are applying jobs, I'm like, don't apply to 300 jobs. Just don't do that. Find the 20 companies that you really want to go work for and go stalk them. Go learn everything you can about them. Get on LinkedIn, connect with former employees, go deep with them, and then figure out where your best fit is, and then apply. But don't go apply for 300 jobs, because that's just spray and pray. It's just stupid.
Agreed. Ditto.
All right,
Ditto.
great. Let's move on to the next topic, which is viewing talent as a critical business resource.
It's an interesting kind of topic and very forefront here at Sprout in that we are thinking a lot about this, not just from a talent perspective, but from a much larger brand perspective as well. How do we activate our employees and have them be proactive communicators about Sprout and about our brand and about the exciting things happening here? And I think that there's an interesting line with this one of where do you how do you do it so that it feels organic and it feels like you're kind of presenting to the team, hey, here's all this really fun stuff that we're able to kind of talk about, and we want you to interact with on social, and we want you to talk about with your friends and stuff like that. To there's a very quick point I think gets to a line where it feels forced and it feels like, hey, we're telling you to tweet this thing out, and it's like, well, that's not really what we're going for here. We want it to be authentic. We want it to be real. So I think that there's I don't have the secret sauce yet. I don't know exactly what the answer is, but it's something that we're continuing to refine every day. I think that one of the things we did recently is internally here is we launched our integration with Instagram, which is a really exciting product update for our company. And so not only did we do a celebration to kind of celebrate the work that our product team had put together for that, the excitement that our sales and success teams had about being able to present that to our customers, but within that we also created a little kind of internal opportunity contest sweepstakes where we were encouraging people to use the existing hashtag that we already have of hashtag Team Sprout, which is what we use whenever we're talking about company-related stuff, culture-related stuff, when we're doing activities, for a recent outing that we did where we went canoeing as a company. And so within that, we're doing like a little kind of reward for prize for some of the more creative photos that people took that use the hashtag, and kind of encouraging the use of Instagram and kind of connecting with Sprout there, but also tying that back to this larger kind of company product release that we had. And I think that kind of a concept, being able to tie things together across multiple departments, across multiple kind of initiatives that the organization is working on, has been really successful. And I think that helps to create, from a talent perspective, hey, that's pushing our employer brand out there. That's getting our hashtags and our handles in front of people that may have never seen it before, and getting a chance to interact with a much broader audience.
Yeah, for years I played a drinking game with CEOs if they ever kind of got to that old axiom of people are our most important asset. You put your thumb to your forehead and drink a tequila. The thing is, you can ferret all that stuff out with one question. Oh, yeah, that totally makes sense. What do you spend on developing them? And then that's where the conversation goes wrong. Because they'll say that, and they've said it for 100 years, that people are the most important asset, but never back it up. It's almost like veterans. Like, we love veterans, right? I mean, it's common sense. All the wars, people that go off, fight for our liberty, blah, blah, blah. We support veterans. Yet, what's the VA's budget? Do we really care about veterans? No, of course not. Because if we did, we'd spend money on them. So there's a separation between what we say and what we think and the actuality. So I believe the way we think about talent now, that talent is the business, is a little bit truer. It's a little bit closer. We're probably not there, but I think if you move your mind over to your favorite sports franchise, and it doesn't matter, baseball, basketball, I like Manchester United. So, okay, think of the way that they view talent for just a moment, how they recruit, how they train, how they retain, how they compensate. How do they go about their business? The talent on field, on pitch, on the court, that is the business. So how is that really different than the way that we operate our businesses? And what you'll find is it's vastly different because they put the talent out front and center, and we don't. And a lot of that is backed up with training and development and leadership and succession and some other things. But I think that as we move forward, the dovetail of cultural transparency and the tie to referrals and advocacy, and Jim's already talked a little bit about advocacy, so I won't do that, but employee referrals are the holy grail of HR. Everyone would love to have it, but it's hard. Because at the end of the day, employees have to love the place they work. They have to love their team. They have to love the values, the vision. They have to feel like there's momentum. And then they've got to recommend somebody that's just as great as they are. And so it reduces recruiting costs immensely when that happens, but it's magic. And so one of the things that you would do with this is try to enable referrals and try to enable advocacy, but don't force the issue. Jim's spot on. The moment it feels forced, like you move in your mind from have to want to, whenever you move over into the have to, it all breaks apart for employees because they should never have to refer somebody or have to be an advocate. They should always want to if that's there. I think there's one last note I'd like to say, and it's foster a culture of hire slow and fire fast. And it's there's some darkness to this comment, but I would tell you that the better that you can get about saying no on the front end, and once you find a poison pill or somebody that's incompetent or whatever the bad hire that drove the bad hire to the place, get rid of them. Get them out. It becomes a game of how fast can you get rid of them. And so, and again, not perfect, but if you think that way of we're going to hire slow and fire fast, and as opposed to the opposite of hiring fast and firing slow.
Fantastic. I've been sitting on a lot of questions here. I haven't been so great at jumping in and interrupting you guys, but we have some wonderful questions, and we have a few more minutes here for a great Q&A. All right, so one of the, let's see, what am I going to choose? I don't know. Can you guys see the questions? Feel free to look at the questions as well if you want to pick the ones that you like the best. But let's start more with that. Can you talk more about talent mapping, linking the talent on hand to the talent that will be needed to support growth?
For sure. Yeah, I'll chime in on that. I think that especially from where I started at Sprout, again, about 50 employees to where we are now, about 180, it's been one of my greatest pride points, I guess, with Sprout, to see those early employees who started with Sprout when we were, less than 20, with less than 30 employees, that the concept of like you have to wear a lot of hats, there's a lot of things you need to be a part of, to having those employees find their path internally here. And I think that it was a resultant of a couple of things. I'll maybe say three. First is that employee being self-aware and being reflective and having that be encouraged within them, having them constantly think about what are they interested in, where they want to be going, what do they see happening at the organization. Two, I'm, again, incredibly impressed with our leadership team here that has done a lot to really make the opportunity for our existing employee base to be able to navigate to new roles, to understand what the expectations are and where they can get those skill sets to be able to continue to grow and to be able to continue to adapt with the organization, that they've been very open in those conversations. And I know that that's potentially a privilege that I work with a team that thinks that way, but that's definitely a piece of it. And then I think 3, from a talent team perspective, is we take meticulous notes during the recruitment process, obviously. We have to make sure we're making great hires. But within that, it gives us a really good insight into what people's background and skill sets are. And so as we're thinking about new roles that are coming up, we have this beautiful database about our employees to be able to go back and say, like, oh, that's right, this person, 2 jobs ago worked in this area. Like, I wonder if they'd be interested in that now. And so it's being proactive about having conversations internally with existing employees that they might be sitting in one role, but that role is definitely going to transform over the next 6, 12, 18 months. Make sure you're having that proactive conversation with them to say, all right, so where are you going? What are you interested in? How does that hark back to what you've done before? What do you see happening here that you're interested in and want to be a part of? All of that is stuff that we are thinking about, kind of those different pieces, how they interplay there.
So imagine for a moment if you hired for life. And in Germany, you actually do hire for life. So when you make a hire, you go in eyes wide open that person's going to go through some slumps, and they're going to go through some ebbs and flows, and so are you as a business. And so you're both buying into that, hey, we're going to adapt to each other. And it's just going to take some time, and we'll start someplace, and we'll get to another place. And I've written about hiring for life, and I think it terrifies us, mostly because we're wrought with terrible decision-making. And so I think that there's that. The other thing that I like about this question is don't hire to a job description insofar as the last person that did the job. So let's say you're hired, there's an office manager that also does some QuickBooks, and that person also is really great at events, and they're really great at social, and they're really great at this other thing. But at the end of the day, what do you need that job to do, which is a vetting process between recruiter and hiring manager of, okay, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Sammy was there, Sammy's going. What do you really need out of the job? And separating those things from the personality or the characteristics of the last person that was successful there.
Fantastic. We have another question here. How do you motivate someone you hired on a project basis?
That's a good question.
If we don't have a good answer for that, I can keep going.
No. Say the question again. Say the question a little bit.
How do you motivate someone that you've hired on a project basis?
Well, I mean, motivation there. First of all, we treat them like an employee. I think that more of the mindset is a talent portfolio, where you think of talent not in a full-time, part-time mentality. You look at all talent, work from home, part-time, full-time, outsourced, offshored, freelance, both internal freelance, external. And you look at these things and say, it's just talent. So what do we need to do? Treat them like employees. So what do you do to motivate an employee? I think actually thinking of them as working on just a project is part of the failure. Don't think of them as working on just a project. Think of them as an employee and talk to them. I would say ... care. Talk to them. Find out, hey, I want to interact with you like you're an employee, and I know you're not. But I want to interact with you there on that level. So what motivates you? Is it rewards? Is it recognition? Is it incentives? Is it comp? Hey, listen, all of it's available to us. What's going to help motivate you? Turns out if you ask people, shocking, news at 11, they'll tell you generally if they're aware. They'll tell you what drives them.
Fantastic. We have a few minutes left. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Sorry, really quick. This relates to every employee, not just project-based employees, but the core of it is that you have to help that individual see how the project that they're working on ties back into the larger business value, that they see the work they're doing actually mattering and actually being a part of the larger picture. And so I think that's where intrinsic motivation comes from largely, and I think monetary compensation and things like that can definitely factor in. But at the core, I think that is where I find most employees looking for connection. So just want to throw that in there.
Okay, great. I'm going to try to squeeze in as many questions until we get kicked off the air and people can leave if they have a hard stop at the hour. But we're quick growing, wear many hats, no 2 days are the same company. How important is it to define roles and responsibilities?
Not important at all. I'll take the hard edge of this. I don't think you have to. Giving them a day in the life, making sure that they understand what's behind the veil, the better that you do that. That no 2 days the same. I think that's actually most companies. In fact, one of my dear friends works for IBM and has for 35 years. He tells me that he doesn't have 2 days that are the same. So I think that's actually business. And people just, the speed in which business is done today. But I think making sure they understand what's there. So how do we render that culture? How do we render the real job? Bring them in. Bring them in. Let them see a day like, hey, we don't want to hide anything from you. We want you to see. You need a title on a business card? Great. Pick one. We don't care. There's the job. You're going to be doing a lot of different things, some of which you're going to be great at, some of which you're not. And we're going to evolve around you, and you're going to evolve around us.
Okay, great. Here's one I really like. How do you change your company website from product-related to people-focused?
I was so hoping you were going to pick that one, Dana. I loved that one. That's fantastic. I think what is interesting about that is that going back to what I was saying before, how Sprout has made the decision that we have a single Twitter handle and a single, a set of social accounts, that we don't have like a @SproutJobs handle. Similar with our website, that our careers website and the opportunity to work here is woven throughout the entire experience of landing on SproutSocial.com and starting to navigate there. I think it goes back to what William and I were talking about before in terms of those relationships with the marketing team, the marketing department, being able to build those relationships and build that connection with them to make sure that the priorities that exist in your world are priorities that exist in their world as well. And I think that when I look at SproutSocial.com, what's cool is that a lot of the language we use on those primary landing pages for the product to be able to talk about what our product actually does, we use a lot of that same language when we're talking about the opportunity of working here. And so you'll see that there's a lot of connection there. And I think that when I first started, that was the first place I looked to understand what I wanted to say about Sprout, how I wanted to talk about it, was going to the website, seeing how we talked about the product, and then taking the excitement that we have in all of that content and transferring it over to the talent side world, and then kind of vice versa, being able to go back to the marketing team and talking to them about strategies that I want to use to attract people and attract candidates and being able to integrate more. And so you'll see different social integrations, things like that, to be able to connect further with our candidates.
Okay, great. We have a few more questions. I'm just going to keep going. We have about a minute and a half left before they kick us off the air. Do you have any thoughts on team structure, shared commission structure versus an each man for himself, typical toxic staffing agency environment? Nice question.
Real quick, just from my perspective, I personally don't believe in a compensation structure for internal recruiters. I don't think it creates the right mindset. Something that William and I were talking about kind of in prep for this is we were talking about using that timed performance metric as some sort of like an additional compensation structure that, the quicker an employee gets up and running, that the recruiter might get like a bonus. We don't utilize that. It's something I'd be interested in exploring. It's interesting. But at its core, I don't believe in that for an internal recruiting structure. I think that it creates the wrong mindset in the recruiter.
Yeah, so it's behaviors and motivations and the alignment to your own values, both as an individual and as a corporation. I just recently saw a firm that's in the core HR space take their implementations, and instead of it being a fixed bid, they make it fixed bid, but at the end of that, it's based on net promoter score, client satisfaction, and go live date. So they've aligned the interest both of that individual, the company, et cetera, and they've aligned compensation around that.
All right, guys, we're getting kicked off in 20 seconds. I apologize. We actually have 5 unanswered questions. I'll work to get those questions to the answers to those who asked. And I just want to thank everyone so much for joining us, including our speakers, Jim and William. We really appreciate your time today. This has been a fantastic webinar, and thank you to everyone. A recording will be sent out immediately after.